April 5, 1933. That is the date the United States government made it a federal crime for American citizens to own gold. Not foreign gold, not pirate treasure, their own gold. Gold coins they earned through honest work. Gold bars they saved for retirement. Gold certificates they trusted as real money. All of it, confiscated, under threat of a $10,000 fine and up to 10 years in federal prison. This is not ancient history. This happened in living memory. And right now, in 2025, every single warning sign that preceded that confiscation is flashing red again. The debt levels, the currency crisis, the banking instability, the government rhetoric, it is all here. It is all happening. And if you do not understand the 1933 playbook, you will be blindsided when they run it again. They are not going to knock on your door and demand your gold at gunpoint. That is not how it works in the digital age. The modern confiscation will be elegant. It will be legal. It will be presented as necessary for the greater good. And by the time you realize what happened, your wealth will already be gone. Let me show you exactly how they did it in 1933, the warning signs they gave, the lies they told, and the precise methods they are setting up to do it again today. To understand why the government confiscated gold, you need to understand what gold represented in 1933. Gold was not just a shiny metal. Gold was the foundation of the entire monetary system. Every dollar in circulation was backed by gold held in government vaults. If you had a $20 bill, you could walk into any bank and exchange it for a $20 gold coin. That was the promise. That was the deal. The dollar was just a receipt for real money, and real money was gold. This system had a limitation that politicians hated. It restricted how much money the government could create. If you only have 100 tons of gold in your vault, you can only print a limited number of dollars. You cannot spend beyond your means. You cannot fund programs you cannot afford. You cannot buy votes with money you do not have. By 1933, the United States was deep in the Great Depression. Banks were failing by the thousands. Unemployment was over 25%. Breadlines stretched for blocks. The economy was collapsing. And President Franklin Delano Roosevelt believed he had the solution. He believed the government needed to spend its way out of the Depression. He believed in stimulus, in public works, in government programs. But there was a problem: the gold standard. The government could not print the money it needed because there was not enough gold to back it. The constitution of money itself was blocking their plans. So, Roosevelt made a choice. He chose to break the system. He chose to take the gold from the American people. He chose to fundamentally alter the relationship between citizens and their government. And he did it in a way that most people did not even understand until it was too late. On March 6, 1933, just 2 days after taking office, Roosevelt declared a national bank holiday. Every bank in America closed. Nobody could access their money. Nobody could withdraw savings. Nobody could conduct business. The country froze. The official reason was to prevent bank runs. The real reason was to buy time. Time to prepare the confiscation order. Time to position the legal framework. Time to ensure that when the banks reopened, the rules would be different. On April 5, 1933, Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102. The order required all citizens to surrender their gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates to the Federal Reserve by May 1st. They had less than 1 month to comply. The government would pay them $20.67 per ounce. That was the fixed price. You had no choice. If you refused, if you hid your gold, if you tried to protect your family's savings, you were a criminal. The penalty was a fine of up to $10,000, which is equivalent to over $230,000 in today's dollars, or 10 years in prison, or both. This was not a request. This was a command backed by the full force of the federal government. Let me walk you through exactly how it worked. Because the mechanics matter. The mechanics reveal the blueprint. The executive order exempted certain categories of gold. Rare coins with collector value were exempt, jewelry was exempt, dental gold was exempt, and each person was allowed to keep up to $100 in gold coins, approximately 5 ounces, but everything else had to be turned in. If you had saved 50 gold coins over your lifetime, you kept 5 and surrendered 45. If you had gold bars in a safe deposit box, the bank reported you to the government. If you tried to transport gold across state lines, you could be arrested. The Federal Reserve set up collection points. Banks became the enforcement arm of the confiscation. When you walked in to surrender your gold, they gave you paper dollars in exchange. They told you it was a fair trade. They told you the dollar was still as good as gold. They lied. Here is what happened next. After the confiscation deadline passed, after the government had collected the people's gold, Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. This act changed the official price of gold from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce. Overnight, with the stroke of a pen, the government devalued the dollar by 41%. Think about what that means. You were forced to sell your gold at $20.67. Then the government immediately revalued that gold to $35. They made an instant profit of 69% on your wealth. They stole it legally. If you had kept your gold, if you had refused to comply, your wealth would have increased by 69% overnight. Instead, the dollars you received bought 41% less. Your purchasing power was destroyed. The government enriched itself at your direct expense. And they told you it was for the public good. They told you it was necessary for economic recovery. They told you that hoarding gold was unpatriotic. They told you that people who kept their gold were the reason the Depression was so bad. That was propaganda. The truth was simpler. The government was broke. The government wanted to spend money it did not have. The only way to do that was to break the link between dollars and gold. And the only way to break that link without causing immediate hyperinflation was to confiscate the gold first. The confiscation succeeded. Americans surrendered approximately 500 tons of gold to the Federal Reserve. The government's gold reserves swelled, and with the constraint removed, the money printing began. The New Deal programs were funded not with tax revenue, not with actual savings, but with newly created dollars backed by nothing but government promises. Now, here is what most people do not know. The confiscation did not happen without warning. There were signs, there were signals, there were policy shifts that telegraphed exactly what was coming. And if you knew what to look for, you could have protected yourself. Warning sign number 1, demonization of gold holders. In the months before the confiscation, government officials and friendly newspapers began running stories about gold hoarders. They painted people who saved in gold as greedy, unpatriotic, even as enemies of economic recovery. The narrative shifted from gold is savings to gold hoarding is sabotage. This is critical. Before any confiscation, the government must make the target politically acceptable. They must make it seem like taking your property is actually justice. They must turn the public against the savers so that when the order comes, most people cheer instead of resist. Warning sign number 2, banking crisis. The years before 1933 saw thousands of bank failures. People lost their deposits. Trust in the banking system collapsed. When Roosevelt declared the bank holiday, it felt like a relief. People were desperate for stability. They were willing to accept almost anything if it meant their money was safe. Crisis creates compliance. When people are scared, they do not question authority. They follow orders. They accept restrictions they would never tolerate in normal times. The banking crisis was not just a problem, it was a precondition for the confiscation. Warning sign number 3, emergency powers. Roosevelt used emergency authority to issue Executive Order 6102. He did not go to Congress. He did not hold public hearings. He did not wait for legislation. He used the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, a wartime law, to justify peacetime confiscation. When the government starts invoking emergency powers, when they start bypassing normal legislative process, that is a red flag. It means they are preparing to do something they know would not survive public debate. Warning sign number 4, capital controls and reporting requirements. Before the confiscation, the government increased scrutiny on gold transactions. Banks were required to report large gold withdrawals. Safe deposit boxes were monitored. The infrastructure of surveillance was put in place before the confiscation order arrived. When the government starts tracking your assets, when they start requiring reports on what you own and where you keep it, that is not curiosity. That is preparation. Now, let me show you what is happening today, because every single one of those warning signs is present right now, not in theory, in practice. Parallel number 1, demonization of alternative assets. Listen to how government officials talk about gold, about silver, about cryptocurrency. They call Bitcoin a tool for criminals. They call gold a barbarous relic. They call people who hold hard assets outside the banking system hoarders, tax evaders, threats to financial stability. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has repeatedly warned about the dangers of cryptocurrency. The IRS has dramatically increased reporting requirements for digital assets. The narrative is being constructed. The people who hold assets outside government control are being positioned as the problem. Parallel number 2, banking crisis. We just lived through the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and First Republic. The banking system is sitting on $684 billion in unrealized losses. Regional banks are teetering. Credit is tightening. The conditions are identical to the early 1930s. And just like in 1933, the government's response is not to fix the underlying problems. The response is to increase control, to expand emergency powers, to prepare for the next phase. Parallel number 3, emergency powers expansion. The Federal Reserve now has authority it never had before. The Treasury can invoke emergency provisions to freeze accounts, restrict transactions, and control the movement of money. The legal infrastructure for confiscation already exists. It does not require new legislation. It requires only a declared emergency. The Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act, the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act. These laws give the government extraordinary power over your money. They were passed during crises. They were never repealed. They are sitting there waiting to be used. Parallel number 4, reporting and surveillance. Banks now report every transaction over $10,000 to the federal government. They report suspicious patterns of transactions under $10,000. The IRS requires disclosure of foreign bank accounts over $10,000. New laws require reporting of cryptocurrency transactions. As of 2024, the IRS requires that any cryptocurrency transaction over $600 be reported. That is not oversight. That is comprehensive surveillance of alternative assets. They are building the map of who owns what. And when the confiscation comes, they will know exactly where to look. But here is where the modern playbook differs from 1933. They are not going to send agents to collect your gold coins. That would be messy. That would create resistance. That would look bad on television. The modern confiscation will be digital. It will be clean. It will be presented as progress. Central bank digital currency, CBDC, that is the mechanism. That is how they will execute the modern confiscation without ever knocking on a single door. A CBDC is a digital dollar issued directly by the Federal Reserve. Unlike the dollars in your bank account today, which are liabilities of commercial banks, a CBDC would be a direct liability of the central bank. The government would have complete visibility into every transaction, complete control over every dollar. Here is how the confiscation works in the digital age. Step 1. Create a crisis. A banking collapse, a cyber attack, a currency emergency, any crisis that creates public demand for stability and security. Step 2. Introduce the CBDC as the solution. Tell the public that digital dollars are safer than bank deposits. Tell them that CBDCs cannot fail. Tell them that this is progress, modernization, efficiency. Step 3. Incentivize adoption. Offer stimulus payments only in CBDC. Pay government benefits only in CBDC. Give tax advantages for CBDC transactions. Make the digital dollar more attractive than alternatives. Step 4. Demonize alternatives. Increase regulations on cash. Increase reporting requirements on gold and silver. increase scrutiny on cryptocurrency, make holding assets outside the CBDC system increasingly difficult, expensive, and legally risky. Step 5. Mandate transition. After a critical mass has adopted, announce that paper currency will be phased out. Announce that bank deposits must be converted. Set a deadline. Anyone who does not comply sees their assets frozen, taxed, or confiscated. This is not speculation. This is the stated plan of central banks around the world. The Bank for International Settlements has published white papers describing exactly this process. The European Central Bank is piloting a digital euro. China has already launched the digital yuan, and the Federal Reserve has been researching a digital dollar for years. They call it FedNow for the payment infrastructure. They have not launched the full CBDC yet, but the architecture is being built. When the CBDC is mandatory, confiscation becomes trivial. They do not need to take your gold. They simply make it illegal to transact in gold. They do not need to seize your cash. They simply announce that cash is no longer valid. They do not need to raid your safe deposit box. They simply freeze your digital wallet until you comply. In 1933, they took your gold and gave you paper. In 2025 and beyond, they will take your paper and give you programmable digital tokens that they control completely. What you should do. 22 to 25 hour. So how do you protect yourself? How do you avoid being the victim of the next confiscation? First, understand the legal landscape. In 1974, President Gerald Ford signed legislation that re-legalized gold ownership for American citizens. Today, you can legally own gold, silver, and other precious metals. But that legality exists only because the government has not yet decided to change it. The lesson of 1933 is that legality is temporary. Rights can be revoked with an executive order. If you wait until confiscation is announced, it is too late. Second, prioritize physical possession. Gold in an ETF is not your gold. It is a paper claim. If the government orders confiscation, the ETF will comply. They will liquidate and pay you in dollars. You will have no choice. Gold in a bank safe deposit box is vulnerable. Banks cooperated fully with the 1933 confiscation. They reported customers. They opened boxes. They enforced the order. If you think your bank will protect you from the government, you are mistaken. Physical gold and silver in your personal possession, stored securely at home or in a private vault outside the banking system, is the only metal you truly control. Third, diversify by type and location. Do not keep all your precious metals in one place. Consider allocated storage in multiple jurisdictions. Some people hold metal in Singapore, in Switzerland, in the Cayman Islands. Jurisdictional diversification means no single government can take everything. Fourth, build a position now while it is legal and unremarkable. If you wait until crisis hits, premiums will be astronomical, dealers will be sold out, and transactions will be scrutinized. If you have $500, buy 10 ounces of silver, keep it at home in a secure location. That is your starting insurance policy. If you have $5,000, buy a mix of silver and gold. Consider 1/4 ounce gold coin and 100 ounces of silver. Keep most at home. Consider a small amount in private vault storage. If you have $50,000, build a serious position. 10 to 20 ounces of gold, 500 ounces of silver. Diversify storage locations. Consider international options. Fifth, stay informed about legislation. Track proposed laws about cash reporting, precious metals dealers, and digital currency. When you see bills that increase surveillance or restrict transactions, that is the warning sign. That is the preparation phase. That is your cue to accelerate your positioning. Sixth, consider privacy. Certain precious metals purchases can be made anonymously under current law. Cash transactions under reporting thresholds. Private sales between individuals. Understand your legal options for acquiring metals without creating a government record of your holdings. I am not advising you to break any law. I am advising you to understand the laws and use every legal protection available to you before those protections disappear. The 1933 confiscation was not a one-time event. It was a playbook, a template, A proof of concept that governments are willing to seize private wealth when they need to, and they will do it again. The warning signs are here: the banking crisis, the emergency powers, the surveillance infrastructure, the CBDC development. It is all following the pattern. But there is one specific indicator that signals when confiscation moves from possibility to probability. It is a policy trigger that preceded every major currency confiscation in modern history, and it just appeared again for the first time since 1971. I reveal exactly what that trigger is in this video right here. Click it now before this information gets buried. I will see you there.